I have a big intro, it'll give them time. Good evening and welcome to this evening's study session of the City Council. Agendas for study sessions, including concept reviews, can be found by visiting Broomfield's website at broomfield.org. Our agenda this evening includes 2 concept review items. The public may attend tonight's meeting and future council meetings in person at the George Luciero City and County Buildings Council Chambers located at 1 Tacone Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Broomfield's website. The public may also participate in public comment on the concept review items only, either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item, and the individuals attending in person will speak first. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 participants have 2 minutes, and if time remains, the next 26 plus participants have 1.5 minutes. Again, if joining virtually for public comment, the number is 855-695-3744 and press *3 to be placed in the queue. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. Please call several minutes before the agenda item and press *3 to ensure you're in the queue for comments. If joining in person, we'll ask you to come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. The first concept review item this evening is a proposal for our 3 single-story buildings with 37 units located west of US Highway 287, northwest of West 10th Avenue and Depot Hill Road. We will follow the city's standard procedures for concept plan reviews. First, the staff will present a summary of the application. Following the staff summary, the applicant will make their presentation. We'll then take comments from members of the Land Use Review Commission and other interested advisory boards, followed by public comment. Then the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments, and finally questions and comments from the City Council. Electronic copies of concept review plans are available at broomfieldvoice.com. Copies of comments provided for each plan at broomfieldvoice.com have been provided to City Council and can be found by clicking the correspondence link at the bottom of tonight's agenda. Council members have a copy of tonight's agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council and community. Judy Hammer, our principal planner, will introduce this item. Applicants are here to provide a brief overview, and both are here to address council comments. Ms. Hammer.
Thank you. Good evening, council members, mayor, and mayor pro tem. Judy Hammer, representing the planning division. The concept review encompasses next slide. A 2.73 acre lot highlighted here. It is located west of US Highway 287, northwest of West 10th Avenue and Depot Hill Road, and subject to the Depot Hill Plan Unit Development Plan and the US West 36 Urban Renewal Plan. Please bring up the video. This video was taken at the southeast corner of the site. It starts out looking east along West 10th Avenue. It pans to the north across the site and continues north. So it pans to the west and continues to the beginning. Thank you. And the next slide, please. The 2016 comprehensive plan land use designation is commercial, which is appropriate for retail, employment, commerce, service, research and development, and office uses. Next slide, please. Again, the concept plan calls for 3 buildings with 37 units. The units are proposed to vary in size between 850 to 2,500 square feet and would be used for common retail, small workout gyms or work or recreation spaces for individuals or other wide variety of uses. These units would be offered for sale and are proposed to include garage and pedestrian doors and restrooms in each unit. Vehicular and pedestrian access is provided via Depot Hill Road, and that encircles the site. These points of access, there's 3 points of access, 2 on the east side and 1 on the west side, and parking is provided in front of each unit. Landscaping is shown throughout the site and along West 10th Avenue and around the perimeter of Depot Hill Road. The detention pond is proposed at the southwest corner. Pedestrian access is shown around the perimeter with internal sidewalks that connect to the buildings with designated pedestrian crossings. Next slide, please. This rendering shows the proposed architecture of the buildings. Each unit will have a separate entrance, like I had indicated earlier, with a garage door. And then you can see some interesting glazing up at the top of the buildings. And then the variation in color with the glazing enhances the architectural style. Next slide, please. Noticing requirements were accomplished per the Broomfield Municipal Code. Staff received 2 comments from this proposal via Broomfield Voice, and those were included in the council folder. The staff memorandum included 2 potential key issues for discussion. One is the Depot Hill PUD plan permits office and retail uses within this planning area subject to a maximum of 42,300 square feet for office and 28,200 square feet for retail. Since the proposed buildings are intended for a wide range of businesses, uses for the buildings would need to be clearly identified in the amendment to ensure consistency and compatibility with the neighborhood commercial center. Prohibiting some uses such as industrial or self-storage uses would be appropriate. And then number 2 on the key issues is parking. This proposal calls for a mix of uses for the units. The applicant is proposing 1 space per 400 square feet of building space. The PUD established parking ratios of 1 space per 300 square feet of office and 1 per 400 square feet of retail space. A variance to these parking ratios would be required, and the applicant will need to establish a maximum square footage of each use that may be permitted, and justification for this customized ratio will need to be submitted with the application for development. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here to present the project in more detail as well.
Thank you. The applicant's presentation is next. Would the applicant's representative please identify themselves for our listeners before beginning your brief presentation this evening?
My name is Patricia Wasik. I'm with CP Development, and we are proposing this project at 1001 Depot Hill. We're excited to put together an outstanding team of professionals that I've worked with in the past to help me with this project. Farnsworth Architecture is here tonight, Rob Stetner. And also my partner at CP Development is Justin Carter. He has done some storage and sites similar to this. My background is more in the healthcare. I've developed almost a dozen medical office buildings, some for myself and for others as third party. But tonight we're here to talk about a unique use, and for this space we selected, as we've been looking in the metro area for many months, we made this selection because of the selection in Depot Hill, because really of the demographics that it's offering, the high income levels, the traffic counts on 287, and then the proximity to Highway 36. So we specifically were attracted to the site for that reason. We love Broomfield because of its proximity both to Boulder and to Denver, and those are where we see our users coming from. So with that, I will turn it over to Jared. He'll talk about the project and give you more detail.
Thanks, Patricia. Good evening, everyone. Mayor, City Council, thank you very much for your time this evening. We're excited to be in front of you. My name is Jared Carlin with Norris Design, 1101 Bannock Street in Denver. Thanks, Judy and Anna and staff for all your guidance getting us to this point. I look forward to working with you throughout the process. Next slide, please. So there's our site as Judy went through on about 2.7 acres. We're excited about the location. I think what we're proposing to talk about today is going to be a really good transitional use from more high density retail along 287 and getting less intense with this and then some of the other uses before you get to residential to the west. The existing Depot Hill PUD, which calls out for office and retail, is old. It's 1979, actually the same age as me, and just like me, needs a little refinement. Not a big change, but a little refinement. At least that's what my wife would say. Yeah, we think that it fits in with the community, like I talked about with the office, retail, and service uses that are directly abutting the site and the residential to the west. The PUD will work with the city staff to update it to reflect the modern design standards that we're going to discuss this evening, and also increase the flexibility. We'll work really closely with the city to make sure that the uses that we're talking about everyone's comfortable with, and that the developer can accomplish what they need to do as well. It's also good. It's within a 5-minute walk of Zhang Park, neighborhood park to the north, which has a playground and sport courts. Of course, the Broomfield Depot Museum is right to the west of the site, and then there's several RTD stops along 287 to the east. Next slide, please. Here's our concept site plan that Judy went through. We're anticipating units that are going to be for sale. And they're for business owners looking for smaller spaces than typical commercial or retail units. They're single-story buildings, 3 buildings. Each of the units are about range in size from 850 square feet to 2,500 square feet. They'll have private entries. Most, but not all, will have garage doors. Then they'll have an option for a mezzanine level. Parking, the 3 access points along Depot Hill Road. From a parking standpoint, Judy went through those. We'll continue working with the city to try to hit that, to try to thread the needle there. We don't want to overpark it, but we don't want to have parking spilling into the surrounding neighborhood. Other projects that are similar like this are parked significantly lower. And so we'll just kind of show those precedents and show what type of uses are there, and submit the documentation so that we all can get on the same page during the process. The detention on the lower left there will tie into Depot Hill. The site layout, you'll see that the site, those 2 buildings in the middle of the site, on the south side of the site, are oriented north-south. And those are, we've been through a lot of different options on this preliminarily, and this is still a concept level for sure, but the reason why those are north-south is for solar orientation primarily, and also working with the fire department with access. But primarily, we don't want to have those entry doors facing north with ice and build up during the winter months. On the landscaping, will also be, xeric, water conscious, will fit in with the surrounding area and will complement the buildings, and also ground the buildings within the site and provide the necessary buffer. And we'll continue to work with the city on that as well. Next slide, please. The architecture, which we're really excited about. This is actually the buildings facing 10th, so the most visible buildings on the ends there, and you can see that that they're inviting, that they're going to be well detailed and designed. They're going to have a variety of building massing, balconies, doors, awnings, all those things that we intend to have on the buildings to add to the streetscape along 10th. Next slide, please. This is the interior kind of shot of what the buildings look like, and just we're going to use contrasting color schemes and materials to provide a fresh, modern approach to the design. Next slide, please. For some of the types of uses that we might see, again, we need to work through these. but they're diverse and they're hopefully going to help serve the needs of the community in a really good way. And they're going to encompass a range of non-traditional uses. Some of those might be the following. Could be more than this or it's different, but it could be some of these things. Workspace and customer interaction space for small businesses. Flexible office space for companies that need to secure equipment. Fitness studio space, maybe for small gym owners to conduct classes. Carpentry shops, a home away from home for families that need additional space for work or fun or work on an old car. Art and photography studios, kind of stuff along that. What they're not going to be are personal mini storage. It's not what this is about. There's a lot of that stuff in the market that you can rent for much less cost per square foot. Next slide, please. Kind of the last slide, we can take you for your time. You know that we went through and looked through the comprehensive plan, and we think this makes a lot of sense, but your comprehensive plan calls for stuff like this and a lot of the language that's in there. So it talks about appropriate mix of land uses, connectivity, livability, flexibility, environmentally sustainable economic vitality. It encourages mixed use developments that look at things a little bit different. Things like shopping and working environments, including a mix of those things in a more compact, dense environment. It also encourages and supports commercial development that contributes to the diverse community image and a vibrant character that provides increased choices and services, which we think this hits really well. So hopefully you'll see it's a good transitional use, and we're looking forward to hearing your feedback on it and then going taking that feedback and continuing to work with the city and the staff as we move through the rest of the process. Again, thanks for your time tonight. Our team's here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carlin, very much. Are there any members of the Land Use Review Commission present who'd like to comment on this proposal? Last call. Are there any other boards and commissions who would like to comment on this proposal? Seeing none, public comments are next. As mentioned earlier, the public may comment both in person or via phone. And if you're joining us on the phone and want to be placed in the queue for comment, please call 855-695-3744 and press *3. If you're joining in person, please line up behind the podium, and public comments will be limited to the time limits outlined earlier.
First one. Hi, my name is Stacy Showalter, and I live in the Lackamora subdivision. My house directly faces that open space that we're talking about. And my main concern is my view right now over the field is the Rocky Mountain Airport and Pikes Peak. And looking at the height of those buildings, it doesn't look like it's going to be about a single-story height. So I'm afraid to lose my view of where my house is based on the height of those. Because if you've got balconies in there, it's got to be more than a single-story structure. And then I noticed one of the pictures they were showing is an auto care, like a car, either a garage with a car in it. So we're talking either a paint booth, or so you've got to have excess building there. You're going to have excess cars outside that are being ready to be fixed. So you're going to have maybe some junk cars sitting out there waiting to be painted or waiting to be fixed. And I worry about the lights. I have an issue right now with one of the buildings on Depot Hill because their lights. They've got these few lights on the back of their building that shines right in my house. And I'm a vampire. I like it dark. And I'm afraid of the lights that it's going to illuminate in addition to what's already out there. So those would be and the noise I wasn't too concerned about unless there is a garage out there. Like I said, one of the pictures showed a garage, and I don't want people working all night on cars out there. It looks further than it is, but no, I can see the little groundhogs out there. And I'm sure somebody's gonna ask about the downtown population that, takes over that field right now, and what's gonna happen with them. So those are my only concerns.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Does the applicant have any final comments?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Schulter, for your comments this evening. We're definitely listening to them and we'll do our best to address them. From a view standpoint, we talked about it being single story. There is a mezzanine, so that does feel like 2 stories, and I can see that. The building height's going to be somewhat less than 20 feet. Yeah. When it's all said and done to the top, and we'll continue to work through that process. There's going to be covenants in place that are going to prevent, and an association is going to prevent junk cars and things like that we can hopefully address within the PUD or with the city. The lighting, we'll have a lighting designer that will make sure that there isn't any glare, so they'll be fully cut off and focus the light downward and work to make sure that happens. And then the same goes for from a noise standpoint. Of course, we're going to follow the city's ordinance there, and if there's anything better we can do, we're open to that conversation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Carlin. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? Councilmember Law Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think this is a really interesting proposal. This particular lot has sure languished. Mr. Carlin, I look forward to seeing your personal PUD plan for your own renovation that you talked about. I'd like to see how your wife suggests that we do that, or anyone's spouse. But this spot was slated for development a long time ago, and it never happened. So I'm really excited to see some interest come along here. And I think it really is a unique and interesting plan you've come up with. I really like the look of the buildings. I really like the use. Clearly you're going to have to fine tune your PUD with the permitted uses. But one thing that immediately when I saw the memo, when I saw that your images, your renderings in the memo, have you considered live work type units? And if not, why not? Because realistically, people are going to live in these anyway. People are going to, now this is a for sale product, is that right? Yeah, people are going to buy it and live in it anyway. So you might as well have that discussion with council. I won't be on council then, but with council in the future as to whether or not that's permitted or maybe specifically under what circumstances. Because if you've got I think you said a small 800 square foot unit, something like that, somebody's going to come along and buy it. It happens all the time, right? The condominiums, the industrial condominiums down off of 116, people are living in those. So just a thought. I don't know if you've thought about that at all. If you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear what y'all are thinking with that.
Yeah, Councilmember Lavin, thanks for the feedback. We've talked about it a little bit, but it's something we're going to have to explore a little bit further with part of what's going to come into play is the utilities and the units or lack thereof.
Sure.
And moving forward and how that will play one way or the other. But it's a good comment. We'll take it into consideration.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll be sitting out there watching this come forward here in a while. But I look forward to it. I think it's a terrific idea. Good use. Good location. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, this is, a tricky piece of land that's been vacant for a long time. And, I think this is a really interesting use. Something not a lot of people here know about me, but I got through college working as an assistant for a goldsmith as a bench jeweler. And I've looked for industrial space in this town for about that size to continue that hobby. Now that I'm more of an established adult, and it doesn't exist. And if we really want to have that art scene in town where people can tinker and do things, especially when their own houses and spaces aren't conducive to that, I think this is a really interesting use. I was actually kind of disappointed that it didn't have a loft aspect or shared use aspect. Where people could live in and work in the units. I just think it's really cool. I think it's interesting. I think it's a great transitional use. I highly encourage you to work with the neighboring residents and figure out things like lighting and make sure that junk cars don't build up on these things. But I honestly just thank you for bringing forward. It's interesting. We don't get a whole lot of stuff like this. So I really like it and I hope it moves forward. So thanks for bringing it to us.
Thank you. Councilmember Groom?
Certainly, I just want to echo that I really like the concept of the product that you guys are offering, and I think it would be really unique for Broomfield. I know of a very similar product that's offered up in Broomfield area, and theirs is much more industrial looking, and so I really appreciate the design of the building, so you're making it more residential, industrial kind of look instead of just a personal storage unit facility. So I like that, and I do like the landscaping. Hopefully it sticks, because a lot of times people come in and build and then we don't get that beautiful landscaping in these pictures that we always see. And then, yeah, definitely on the lights, it is close to the neighborhood, so we have to make sure that you've got the downward lights and some go off at night. And then I had a question about hours of operation. So it sounds like some of these could be coming and going businesses. And the one thing I want to make sure of is there's nothing like a bar or a pub or, a lot of people do some, I guess they make whiskey now even in small quantities, that doesn't become a nightlife there. Can you address any of those concerns?
Yeah, Councilmember Groom, there will be the ability to make whiskey, maybe. I guess that would be up to the city, or make some of those things, but not have like the nightlife people there.
Okay, thank you. And so the hours of operation would be also controlled by the covenants in regards to noise and any of those things. And I don't know, maybe staff, you can address this, sorry. Is that something that Broomfield would look over? That covenants, how do we control that? Or do we?
We don't control the covenants, but we would work very closely with the applicant to identify the uses in the PUD.
Okay.
And perhaps that would include, hours of operation for some uses. Maybe they would need to look at some use by special reviews for particular uses that would require a permit specifically for that.
Okay. And then one last question. What is the typical size of a two-story house? Is that like 30 or 33?
In elevation,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Okay. So this being 20 feet
is about 10 feet less.
okay.
Yeah,
So it's about 1.5 stories.
Right.
Not just the 1 story.
Yeah, if they were to keep it at the 20 feet.
All right, perfect, thank you. And that just made me think of one more question for the applicant, and that is in regards to solar or anything. I noticed that you're presenting flat roofs. Is there anything that you've been conceptualizing for Leeds building? That's great.
Sorry, doing this on the fly. So we're considering and looking at doing EV charging stations with this. I think you'll see that when we move forward, and then also at the very least getting something in there for putting in the wiring for the solar panels, then figuring that out, however that
The
moves forward.
individual owners. All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinkle?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys so much for this presentation. I actually really appreciated that you took the consideration that this is Broomfield. You guys, when you did your presentation, I was actually really impressed. A lot of other people that come in here as developers are all about, here's what we've done here, here's what we've done there. And you guys are saying, here's what we're gonna do here. And I actually really appreciate that. And I've never told another developer this, so I really appreciate this. In regards to the staff's key issues, I hope we can address parking and those sorts of things. I think that would be important. Alongside the sustainability questions, I had questions just a little bit about natural lighting. It looks like in a lot of those buildings, I'm not sure how much natural lighting they're gonna have or what lighting, that might look like for them. And then also, I don't know if you guys can address the garage doors. I know that we don't want to have, self-storage. But I also know that garage doors could look like self-storage. So I don't know if you guys are willing to look into what could look different than like a garage door at each place. Because it could look like, you have, like a lot of pubs will use that. And then they serve outside of their garage door. Or it could look like, self-storage on the outside. So have you guys looked into other options, maybe a garage door on one? And maybe another type of opening, so it just doesn't look like it could be garage door after garage door after garage door. You guys looked into that?
Councilmember Engel, we were speaking with the architect, and I think that one of the ways we're looking at doing that is the garage doors themselves, having some opacity or some glass, and then the doors themselves. But we'll look at things like if there's other ways to bring natural light, into the spaces as much as we can.
Okay, all right. And just as far as aesthetics go, if you guys would mind just looking into differentiating, each spot so that it doesn't look like it is a self-storage from the outside. And I would like to see, some sort of sustainability things like you mentioned EV stations and, solar hookups and, even, I like the fact that you guys are zero escaping, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So those are very important to us, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen?
Thank you. I will echo the other concern, council members, in terms of a very interesting development. Looks like it's probably highly needed in this area with the unique uses. But I has a couple nitpicky questions, perhaps. I'm reading in there. It said, did I read correct that there's no air conditioning? That you plan to address that later, which would be added to the roof, which you would need to conceal at some point, which would then raise the roof line, correct?
Councilmember Cohen, the rooftop AC would be an option, and right now that's what we're thinking. And then if there is AC, it would be on the roof. Then we'd have to go work with the city on screening them appropriately.
But the roofs wouldn't be flat, and we'd have to add some sort of facade higher than the 20 feet.
Potentially, we'll have to work through those details on exactly how high the buildings are with that.
Isn't it highly likely everyone will want DC?
Maybe. Perhaps.
But it seems like that's something that needs to be addressed going forward, because it sounds like the roof line height is going to vary beyond 20 feet from here to here. On that line, I wanted to echo Councilmember Groom in terms of solar. It would be great to see a solar sustainability plan, since that much roof is available. Also, I forget if you said it, but electric vehicle charging stations on site would be something I'd love to see as well. I do have a concern about parking, considering the many mixed uses that you're potentially listing here. I have a hard time seeing that this wouldn't potentially fill up and spill out into the neighborhood. If you have a gym, if you have a potentially bar, there's gonna be a lot more than one or two people there at one time. I don't know if you can address what your thinking is there and why we're at 300 and not 400.
Yeah, we're just so early on in the process and trying to understand really what the parking wants to be. And so we'll work with the city on that. We hear your concern. It's on us to come to you all with the justification for why we're asking for what we're doing. So I think that's something that we'll work on over the next few months.
And I just read it because there's a wide variety of potential uses being listed here. And it also, I noticed it said, I think you mentioned it in your presentation, home away from home, mixed in with retail and car working or whatever. It seems like I don't envy whoever's in charge of this association and trying to manage the usages, but that was just one concern going forward. And finally, I will bite on the prairie dog issue. Kristen's back there. I know the availability of saving the prairie dogs depends month to month practically on if there's room to take them. So I don't know if you've had a conversation with the folks in open space and what potential there is.
All I can say is we'll work with the city and do whatever is necessary, whatever we need to do to make sure that we're handling that issue the right way.
And pledge that we won't see any mass extinction by accident in advance. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Chef?
Thank you, Mayor. So, when I look at this space, there's a great need to develop this vacant land that's been sitting there for quite some time. I hear about it from residents in that area. And as well as I think that by building something that is going to spur the reinvestment of the surrounding area as well. And that's also the other concern I hear. So I think that this project has the potential to be both, especially if it's built correctly and the uses are in line, that it has that intention there. And I think that that's where I see most of this project is really moving with intention forward. So I like the ideas that some of my council colleagues have thought about, the idea of including a loft, or at least a loft option in some of those buildings. I think that there is some intentionality behind that. I think that, looking at the height of the buildings, I think that Councilmember Cohen brings up a great piece, which is within that PUD, that almost has to be built into that PUD is the height of this building and what that will actually look like as opposed to amending this down the road. The use of storage in this council memo gave me some alarm with the possibility of a storage unit here. And I don't think that that's the intention, but that piece of storage does give me some worried feelings. I think that as the PUD amendment comes forward, it sounds like that's the intention as opposed to bringing the whole thing together at once. I think that for me, I would need the most upfront information to provide what are those uses going to be, what is the ideal mix of retail and uses that will be actually done here. Again, what is the intention of it? I love the idea that these are going to be for sale products. And just a clarification on that, are each of the individual units going to be for sale or just the three buildings itself?
Each of the individual units would be offered for sale, not the whole full buildings.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to clarify that. And then I think one comment that I don't think has been said is I think that there needs to be great curb appeal at the corner of 10th and Depot Hill Road, especially closest to Highway 287. I think right now that's kind of missing as you come into that neighborhood, and I think it would be great to have some curb appeal right there on some of the artist renderings. It's missing, and I think that there's a great opportunity to really kind of enhance that entrance into this area. I mean, the Depot Museum is right behind it, which is great. It's been refinished. There's a lot of curb appeal there, and then the surrounding residents as well. This place needs that. It needs some little pop and pizzazz. So I hope that will be considered as it moves forward. So thanks for bringing this project forward, and look forward to the next steps.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim?
The residents who commented on the Broomfield Voice, one of which was a Ward 3 resident who commented that she picks up the trash on this site regularly. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank her without naming her, that she does that because it is a site that can accumulate trash in Ward 3. Unfortunately, the both residents who commented on the Voice spoke about the need for the repair of the surrounding sidewalks, which if you were watching the video, you saw. Ugh. And I walked on over the weekend. So the developer staff will be required to repair those sidewalks. The residents will want affirmation of that.
Yes, they would be required to upgrade the sidewalks.
Okay, great, thank you. The uses, yes, the uses, it would be helpful if the uses were specified very specifically in the PUD coming forward. There is a child care facility
and a school, I believe, in close proximity. So that I would certainly hope would be taken into consideration with any uses of this complex. Could staff comment? We're talking about possibility of maker spaces, at least that's the way I identify them in my mind, in the Safeway building at Broomfield Town Square. Would you characterize those spaces that are going to be in the Safeway building in the same way, and how would these be different?
I'll take that question. Thank you, Anna Bertanzetti, Planning Director. So I think there could be some overlap. We're definitely looking at some creative spaces, both with the Broomfield Town Square's reuse of the Safeway building and with what the applicant is proposing this evening. I think we won't know exactly how much overlap until we continue to work with the applicant this evening and really refine down their uses. But I think there's a lot of commonality with trying to appeal to people who are needing these 400 to 800 square feet uses for some of those creative industries.
Okay, thank you. And so from the staff's perspective, then you don't see this project as competing with what we want to be able to accomplish with Broomfield Town Square?
From staff's perspective, I think that these are very different locations, and I think they could appeal to different, although kind of in that same realm of creative industry, but potentially to different end users.
Okay, thank you. The parking issue, that is of a concern to me in that area in Ward 3. There's street parking along the loop, and different commercial entities and residents use that already. So it would be preferable not to have this development's parking overflow into that loop on a regular basis. So that would be helpful if we could guarantee that the parking was sufficient in the development. Signage. This is not quite the stage for signage, I understand that. But it hit me right away as I looked at the orientation of the development and the small frontage on 10th, that there's going to be possibly, I don't know how many separate entities in that development, up to 37, I think you said. Are they all going to want to place on a sign on 10th? What are you envisioning here with a sign? Because that is a small area to have a sign with 37 names on it. That's what you have in mind.
We haven't looked at signage quite yet. More than likely what we're going to be looking at is working with the city staff on more directional signage, probably signage on the individual doors if there are signage there, but we'll try to make sure that we're within code, that it's appropriate for the site, that doesn't seem out of place, all of those things.
Okay, thank you. And there was a resident suggestion that seems that the developer is headed in the right direction with that suggestion. That resident suggested that the developer become engaged in the community. The resident suggested that there are needs of that community in that area with a food pantry and usage of the park. And the resident suggested that the developer who is coming into this area engage fully with the community and its nonprofits in whatever other way that they could support the community in that Lackamora area. So we would certainly support that also from council's perspective. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Jaworski.
Thank you. I will be brief. Thank you for bringing this project in front of us. But when I first saw it, I was kind of lukewarm on it. I'll tell you the truth. When I look at this property, I sort of see that it was it looks like it was designed for some sort of an office retail park, just judging by the little horseshoe and the existing buildings that are there. And I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I think it could fit in the area. But my concern is the reality of what actually turns out. And really, it's because of what you've already heard from my colleagues, is the concern that this is going to turn into a storage facility. And that's something that I think we've been fairly clear over the last year or so on city council, that we're not interested in storage facilities in Broomfield anymore at this point, and particularly probably in this location. So what I heard so far is that your guarantee, I guess I'll call it a guarantee, that the price point will keep this from being storage related. These are for sale units. So what are you anticipating the prices to be on these? Do you have a range?
From a sales standpoint, somewhere between $250 to $350 a foot. So I guess you have to run the math on that for what it would be per unit.
Yeah, you'd have to do some math for me. My brain is not working past 5 o'clock. And we're already at 7. But I guess while you're figuring that out, I think I've seen some assumptions, and if you just clarify, so you guys do plan on having covenants on the property? Is that correct?
Yeah, we will have covenants and work through that process and make sure that we ensure that it's going to fit with the community. So, and then to go back to your first question about cost, so 1,000 square foot unit would be roughly $350,000, something like that. And there's a range of the size of those units.
Okay, so I guess I would tend to agree with you that it's unlikely that someone would use this for storage based on the price, but I would certainly want to make sure, not just in our PUD, but also in the covenants that you put together, that there is strong language in there addressing the prohibition on storage, use of storage. So that'd be something that if you have an association, the other owners or potentially a third party could enforce. Because I think that's the real concern that I have, and I think some of my colleagues as well. And other than that, I went there, you have glass in the doors, it just sounded nice. So that's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Tessier.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for bringing this forward. Yeah, there are 22 storage facilities within 5 miles around this area, so no storage ever for Broomfield. I love Councilmember Schaaf's and pop and pizzazz. I mean, I can just see it now, like, oh my God, yes, bring it, because so it can really be, that area is just such a neat area. And I would not, I'm hoping that there is a distillery of sorts, and even with a tasting room, like Whistling here, I don't know if you've seen that place, but it's perfectly unique. It's so quaint. It's really tiny. It doesn't make a lot of noise, mostly inside. And that's where I think my parking issue would kind of come in, where if we hopefully have more parking than not parking, because I would not want it to disrupt the neighborhoods around there. And I'm glad to hear that you're looking at the way lights are in the surrounding areas. So no light is shining on the neighborhoods. And looking kind of at more dark sky kind of lighting if possible. I appreciate Councilmember Comments for bringing up the prairie dogs, because I was going to bite on that one, and hopefully, we can save some lives. Okay, that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, and I will keep this brief as well. This whole option is pretty intriguing. And I look at this, I've seen things similar to this. I have girls that dance and weight lifts, and there's a lot of these little gym spaces. And so the first thing that came to my mind wasn't thinking about the potential for like an automobile shop and somebody doing some car painting or some other industrial work. And picture back, my dad would have the garage door wide open, music blasting, half the stuff out in the driveway. And I'm pulling up, to drop my little kid off for dance or something. It's just not, I just see that conflict. So it's just like whatever you can do within those covenants to ensure that certain sections are, like the car mechanic technique is only allowed in certain sections. So if somebody was like a fitness gym or something else wouldn't be next to somebody doing some work. And also, I can also picture my dad, this comes into like the late hours and typical business, it closes at 5 or 6, but there's that possibility if this is kind of your own space and you're using it, that you might actually kind of take that leeway to like, you want to finish up the project and out 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I could see that would be the impact to the community to somehow ensure that they're not going past those hours with the garage door open and working. So those are the type of things that I was thinking of, but I can definitely see the need for the space for all those options that were listed. And I also want to second this or third, the live work option. I think that's intriguing. If there really was an opportunity, because somebody they could save on their rent then by living there, and I'm not sure, maybe there's complexities that prevent that, but it's definitely worth looking into. And the solar panels, as we're moving towards more sustainability here, are at least the hookups and that option are definitely for consideration. And then there's a note in the memo, we talk about ensuring this would be a positive to our tax revenue. But if we had some people that were using these spaces for their own kind of private hobby, then there wouldn't be that tax revenue coming in. So I think that's one other consideration that we should keep in the forefront. But other than that, I think it looks great. And yeah, no storage, I guess I can agree with that one. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, did you get some good feedback, good direction? Well, thank you very much for being with us this evening and bringing this project. We look forward to seeing you again. Our second concept review and final item on the agenda this evening is a proposal for a 4-story apartment complex with 96 multifamily residential units located south of Zhang Street and to the west of Flatiron Boulevard. We will follow the city's standard procedures for concept plan reviews as previously outlined. Council members have a copy of the agenda memorandum for this proposal, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. It is the Judy Harmer show tonight. Once again, we're going to walk through this item. Judy's here for questions, also brief applicant presentation. Ms. Harmer.
Thank you. Judy Hammer, representing Planning Division. And this is 505 Zhang Street Concept Review. Next slide, please. The concept proposal is for an apartment complex with 96 residential units on a 3.74 acre lot that is in with Mid-Cities planned unit development. There are 1 and 2 bedroom units that will be offered. 19 will be priced at 60% area median income. Next slide, please. The subject site is located at the southwest corner of Zhang Street and Flatiron Boulevard, in close proximity to the existing Walmart to the west and restaurants and commercial businesses to the south. Next slide, please. The Broomfield Comprehensive Plan designation for the subject property is mixed-use commercial. The comprehensive plan indicates that as a guide, no more than 30% of the land area within the district should be used for residential unless approved through the PUD process. Recently, the Lock apartment complex was approved, which is to the east of the site. This additional residential use increased the land area within this district to approximately 28%. This current request for the concept review here tonight, ultimately approved, would bring the total land area within the mixed-use commercial district to approximately 30%. Therefore, the concept proposal is consistent with the land use map designation. Following provides an aerial video of the site. The video is taken just north of the roundabout on the north edge of the site. It begins looking northeast along Zhang Street. Then it pans to the south. And across the site and continues around to the beginning. And the next slide, please. The Mid-Cities PUD plan allows mixed uses, but all residential units allowed in the PUD have been already approved and constructed. If this proposal proceeds, the applicant will need to request an amendment to the PUD to increase the number of dwelling units allowed within this PUD. The site provides for 138 on-site and 22 off-site spaces that will be offered on the parking lot to the north of the site and are available via a parking agreement. This would provide for 180 spaces when 168 would be required. The parking lot to the north is very large and can accommodate shared parking. Staff recommends that the applicant increase this cross-parking agreement to ensure that the minimum parking requirements are met. The site is encumbered with various easements, including impacting the available locations on the site for building placement. Next slide, please. The developer provided these architectural renderings with regards to the concept plan. Should they move forward with this development, the color story will need to be revised to earthen tones per the Architectural Control Committee. Next slide, please. City and County Broomfield public notice requirements have been met for the hearing. Staff has identified the following key issues. The first one is being that the development may require two variances, one for the parking and the other for setback encroachment. Should the applicant not be able to amend the shared parking agreement to increase the number of spaces, a variance would be needed. The concept plan calls for the parking lot to be 10 feet from the west side lot line, where the PUD calls for the parking lot to be outside of the 20-foot setback. The applicant would need to provide justification for the setback encroachment. The second issue is the PUD amendment and impacts to the long-range financial plan. The amendment would allow for an increase in the number of residential units within the PUD. The property was originally anticipated to develop for commercial use. The long-range financial plan analysis indicates that the change in use would reduce the expenditures to revenue and reduce the projected annual revenue at building out by $97,594. The third issue is the public land dedication. Based on the residential use, additional public land dedication of 4.40 acres is required, which equates to a cash in lieu fee of $522,760. The applicant has requested a waiver of 100% of the PLD based on the affordable housing that is offered and their proposal to contribute approximately $246,000 towards landscaping and trail amenities along the trail segment. The concept plan does not show the trail connection. Staff believes the proposed landscaping and amenity improvements do not commensurate with the cash in lieu requirements. And since the trail was previously built and the applicant is meeting the minimum requirements for on-site affordable units, staff is not supportive of a request to waive the remaining PLD valued at the $52,760. Additionally, the Open Space Trails Advisory Committee has provided a letter found in the correspondence folder for tonight's meeting, also sharing their concern with the applicant's proposal. Thank you. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Jaguar. The applicant's presentation is next. Will the applicant's representative please identify himself for our listeners before beginning your brief presentation this evening?
Hi, good evening. My name is Eduardo Claus and I'm a principal at Exodus Development. We're a team, collective 80 years of experience developing, designing multifamily projects. These are some of the projects that we designed and managed. Next slide, please. And approximately a year ago, we decided to have a new mission to build attainable and workforce housing because we think it's really needed. We think it's we live in a time where luxury housing, a lot of it, there's a lot of luxury housing being provided, but there is definitely there are folks who are in the missing middle. It's not a lot being good for a middle class. So we thought how to solve that. And there is this new technology in construction now called off-site construction. It's pretty common in other countries like the UK or Sweden. It's just starting here in the US. These are some examples of buildings constructed off-site. As you can see, the quality is the same. The noise insulation is even better. It's greener, cleaner, faster. Next slide, please. So, and the selection of this area came about when the previous owner, he had approved the site for a hotel, approximately the same size, the Home to Suites brand. And unfortunately, it seems like the market is not able to absorb that at this point. There's a lot of hospitality product out there at this moment. And likewise with retail, it seems like the space in the area is not fully absorbed. So we thought, well, here's a beautiful way to, give bring to the workers in the area housing and make it, create a use that is complementary with the uses in the area. Next slide, please. So two things in particular that I'd like to highlight about the project. One is that we're proposing, well, in terms of affordability and sustainability, we're proposing that 20% of the units be rent restricted to tenants earning 60% of area median income. And that's in line for company mission. And the other is that in addition to the typical measures, the green measures that we typically see, because we're dealing with off-site construction, there are studies that show that off-site construction reduces the carbon footprint by 17%. It's also faster than usual, so it creates less, less noise and sport for the neighbors. So with that, I'd like to pass through our architect, Chris from Galloway Architects.
Christopher Kenton with Galloway and Company. Next slide. So just a little quick overview on the site. Judy did a good job kind of summarizing it. This is a really tricky site. There's a lot of encumbrances on this site, a lot of utilities, a lot of easements running through it. So it really doesn't allow for a lot of different configurations in terms of how you can configure the site. Next slide. I think we'll start with the site plan. It'll be a little more descriptive. The entire kind of northeast corner of the site is almost fully encumbered by different easements that cut through there. So building placement along that street edge is virtually impossible. There's a multitude of different easements from underground utilities, water easements, trail easements, et cetera, that run through there. So we situated the building on what is kind of the southern edge of the site and tried to configure it in a way where it could still be a terminus to the Main Street retail, where you would see it at the end of that streetscape and help draw that in there. And Eduardo mentioned, I mean, one of the things, having been involved with a lot of the projects and a lot of work out there at Flatirons, there's a lot of vacancy in the retail market. And part of that is the entire surrounding context is hospitality, retail, and a little bit of office. And so you really don't have the consistent daytime housing use, where you've got the users on site on a more regular basis. And so I think that's one of the things when we looked at this site in terms of being a compatible use is, yes, we may be losing commercial on this site, but by adding residential, it only helps to kind of invigorate the surrounding retail, because now you have users there on a daily basis that will use the restaurants, use the adjacent retail, et cetera. So And as we kind of looked at it, that was the overall kind of driving factor in terms of how we configured it. How do we connect it from a site layout standpoint? Judy mentioned the existing trail easements that run along was kind of the southern edge of the site. Those are developed. We envision enhancing those through the landscape design of the site and bringing that back up. It's a little bit deteriorated. You've got the grand stair at the end of the roundabout that crosses through there. And so how do we kind of provide that pedestrian connectivity from one end to the other and down into the main street will be something that we would want to develop through the landscape design, the urban streetscape, et cetera. You can skip on to the next slide. There's the color site plan. Sorry, I thought we would have cut that one first. My apologies. So then skip to the next one. And Judy mentioned, I mean, one of the things that we wanted to do here is we wanted to do something, you know, iconic from an architecture standpoint, you know, that would create, you know, a nice focal point at the end of the main street. There are some things that we understand we're going to have to readjust based on the color palette and fit into the context of the overall mid-cities development plan. So there will be some changes there. But one of the things that you can really see within this design is, you know, modular construction is often kind of thought of as being not as interesting and because it's overly repetitive, but there's some really interesting techniques and things that you can do with the articulation and the fenestration pattern to create that variety. And you see that in terms of what we're proposing from the exterior and through the use of different patterns, different materials, different colors, et cetera, to really kind of enliven the building and make it much more visually interesting. The ground floor is obviously articulated with a masonry base that would be consistent with what we see throughout the rest of the site in the retail market, et cetera. Overall, I mean, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. The last piece I guess I would talk about is sustainability. I know that was a big conversation on the last piece, and Eduardo mentioned that in terms of the modular construction. Really does bring a lot of value. It reduces the impact on site to the surrounding neighborhood, you know, in terms of just the environmental mitigation of what's going on from a construction standpoint. There's efficiencies that are achieved through the modular construction. There's less waste. All of those types of things play into it from a site standpoint. And then it obviously allows us to build things a little bit quicker and deliver a product that is of high quality, high standard in a more timely basis, and especially in a market today like we have today, where housing is definitely a high need. And as Barbara mentioned, you know, for that middle class, middle income side of things, that it's really a missing market segment within the surrounding area. So with that, I'll wrap it up.
I think we have one more slide. Yep. I think it's the last slide. There we go. My name is Phil Workman, and thank you, Mayor and members of City Council, for having us here this evening. Just want to introduce myself briefly. My name is Phil Workman. I'm a partner with the Partner Company. We are pleased to be working with Exodus Development on a community outreach process. As we already heard, it's very important. There's a number of challenges, not only with the site, but also externally, that we really need to work with collaboratively with our surrounding stakeholders. So we're looking forward to, as part of this, working through the process, listening to your concerns today is very important to us, as well as the surrounding stakeholders as we work through some of those challenges that have been already articulated. This is just kind of, as we implement community outreach, we like to work with the adjacent neighbors and then move outward. And we look forward to implementing this process as we move forward. But certainly we recognize that community outreach to work collaboratively with our adjacent neighbors and stakeholders and to create this development that Broomfield can be very proud of, as well as work collaboratively with all the surrounding groups and the city and county as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Next, are there any members of the Land Use Review Commission present who would like to comment on this proposal? Still none. How about any other boards and commissions members who'd like to comment on this proposal? Please step up to the podium.
Mayor and City Council members. I am Michael McLean. I am a member of the Open Space and Trails Advisory Committee, and specifically of the subcommittee that can't stand to only meet once a month. So we get together and also do concept reviews with open space as requested. And on this particular occasion, we got ambitious and sent you all a letter. And I'm just letting you know that I am here to answer any questions should they involve the letter we sent you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, Mr. McLean. Well, public comments are next. If you're joining on the phone and want to be placed in the queue for comment, please call 855-695-3744 and press *3. If you're joining in person, please line up behind the podium, and public comments will be limited to the times outlined earlier. We'll start with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. And limit your comments to 3 minutes. Well, I'm not seeing any online, so we'll move on to Councilmember comments. Who wants to go first? I have to go last, so it can be me. Okay, Councilmember Cohen.
I'll go first. Just to follow up on Michael's comments in terms of livability at this location. There really isn't any parks anywhere near this. There's a golf course, but we know how accessible that can be sometimes. Can you address the design? I don't see any balconies. I don't see any access to open space for people who would actually live here, which is probably why it was perhaps better located for a hotel. So can you just address that concern, considering this is a residence surrounded by concrete for the most part?
Yeah, I don't think that the balconies aren't a part of the design at this stage. Obviously, we're just at the very early conceptual stage, and as we get the unit mix kind of figured out, those types of outdoor amenities within the building structure will be taken into account. On the site, we do kind of plan on the north end of the site that you saw on the colored site plan where it's green space, looking at that as some outdoor amenity space. So that could be, passive outdoor space. It could be active outdoor space with dog parks or different types of things like that. But again, obviously the site itself is somewhat constrained in terms of what we can actually kind of even fit on there, given all the different constraints. And then, as we mentioned, just the connectivity to the regional trail system and being able to access that and then move throughout the entirety of the Flatiron Village surrounding area.
Well, in looking at it, one, yes, it needs connectivity because there are trails in the area. This would not be any parks really accessible. It would be only that little area in the north, as you mentioned, in the corner. If there are no balconies, then no one has access to fresh air or any place to step out really. And then they go down to the first floor, they're just a sea of concrete and parking. So that's what why would we endorse, this many people living on a Walmart parking lot, and all that other concrete?
Yeah, so I said, there will be balconies in those types of space. So there will be opportunity from a building standpoint for them to get outdoors.
That is the main concern looking at this. As you said, it's a difficult piece of arson, and that's the main concern.
Thank you. Councilmember Broom?
Certainly. Thank you, and thank you for considering Broomfield for this bill. And I think for me, just looking at it, it's not the right spot. I think it's going to be very difficult to build on, and with the setbacks and the parking, those are some of the things that we get majority of our comments on, especially parking in that area, and then converting it from residential, business to residential. And we're looking at our full build out right now for Broomfield, and converting land is an essential piece of that decision making. So every piece of land we convert, we lose money on, right? For not just now, but for for perpetuity of all of Broomfield. So I think those are some of the things that I would be fighting on in moving forward with this program, as well as, our goal here also is to make sure that everyone has a park within distance to play in. And I think this is going to be out there without any accessible play areas if kids are there. So that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Shaft.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of the intriguing concept reviews that we've had recently, and I would say that even more so since we've gotten our economic vitality matrix team in place. So the idea of getting this matrix team in place was to bring appropriate uses into our undeveloped lands, and this one for me seems a little oddball, and I'm just trying to get a good idea from staff on kind of why this project fits in this place and why this is the best use in this place.
We appreciate that, Councilmember Shaft. Two things. One, staff cannot preclude a developer coming before council. So the conversations that we have on the front end are clearly staff knows council well. We know what's important. We know what you all look for. So two things to that point. One is, again, can't preclude a developer from coming forward. And the second thing is, from a concept review perspective, you're right on the money with what the number one item is for a concept review, and that is land use. Is the project right for that particular land use? So all of the other kind of accoutrements, the traffic, the parking, the architecture, the landscaping, that all comes subsequent to the concept review. So identifying staff's concerns and overcoming those concerns. Anna can talk a little bit more about what that cadence looks like with regards to projects. But again, just kind of managing those expectations. We identify when staff does have hurdles that we think the developer needs to overcome. And we identify those in the memo. Anna, can you confirm and fill in any blanks for me, please?
Thank you. Anna Bertazzetti, Planning Director. So I think concept review is a great tool that our development potential developers utilize to get feedback on exactly what you're asking. Is this the right use in this location? Would it have council support were it to move forward? So typically how staff works with developers preparing for concepts is to try and make sure that they are providing the strongest argument they can moving forward. A good example here is that the applicant is providing affordable units rather than the cash and lieu option. So strengthening the application as much as it can, as much as the project can hold, and then coming before all of you and the greater community to get the feedback, and then they can make the decision about whether they feel confident to move forward.
Great, I appreciate that. So my second question has more to do with the challenges of this particular parcel.
Mm-hmm.
So better understanding that, we've had some pieces of land that have been very difficult to develop, regardless of what the use is. And sometimes there's only particular uses, or there are going to be particular uses that are going to be more beneficial to those challenges. So can you help me understand what the challenges are for this parcel and how that is going to limit what is developed on this project or on this parcel?
Thank you, Councilmember, Mayor, City Council. So some of the challenges have already been identified by the applicant. So there's a number of easements that cross this property. We've had 2 prior hotel approvals on this site. So I think the first occurred probably around 2006 or 7, right in there. And then again was renewed a few years ago. So there's been approved site plans for hotels that haven't been able to move forward. So challenges would be the market readiness and acceptance of that additional hotel use. whether the support for other retail would be supported in this use. But I think the biggest challenge here is its location, kind of at the end of Zhang. And then also those encumbrances, the easements are really going to make it challenging. And I think one of the prior developers was able to work with the adjacent property owner with a larger parking lot to get a cross parking easement. And I think that ability to work together is what will make this property developable.
Okay, and so just looking at the map that we had, it looks like there's kind of a maybe northwest to southeast easement, and then there's another one. I guess it's almost kind of west to east at a diagonal. So those are two very big easements that are going through this project. If the use on this parcel was much more smaller buildings as opposed to a bigger building, is that something that can work, or are these easements going to still cause conflict between the uses and those easements?
Certainly a smaller building would provide greater flexibility. And actually one of the prior approvals, the first hotel that was approved here, actually proposed to remove and relocate one of the utilities to create a greater building footprint for themselves. That's very costly to move these large easements or to these large utilities and then update the easements. But that is another option if, again, the project has to financially balance.
Okay, well, I appreciate all the conversation around this. I mean, I guess I'm not quite sold on this. There are pieces of this project that I really do like. You know, the idea of doing the modular construction. I believe this is the same type of construction that we had on the BCC, Broomfield Community Center, which went very well in terms of getting that building set up and ready to go. So I think that there's the look of this building. It's well done. I think there's some concerns that I would share with some of my council colleagues about the access to balconies and fresh air and things like that. But I think that there's some good and some not so great with this. And I think that, you know, better understanding of what the best use of this parcel is going to be, you know, in terms of what that conversation can look like. I don't know if that's a conversation we can have tonight or if that's a conversation that we have down the road.
I think it's a better conversation for down the road. Councilmember Schaaf, and just from the applicant that was before. So many of those questions are questions that they had to address on the fly, because again, a concept review is not designed so that when the applicant comes in, they're not prepared. And so oftentimes it looks like they're not prepared to fulfill what our desires are, when in fact, it's a very precursory piece. It is a worthy conversation. And anytime that from a council priority perspective, that when these developments that they hit that council priority, they will come before council. So to Anna's, Ms. Burtonzetti's point, when the council priority being affordable housing, whether it's a difficult to develop site or lot or not, we would bring that forward because it does check that box. Not to say it's an easy development, certainly, but certainly one for additional conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be my last comment. I mean, is that I don't want to see this project go away because I think that there's a lot of conversation still to be had with this. I would encourage you to continue conversations with staff on this project because there's some things that are really great about this project. I would like to see this continue to move forward. It may not be in this space. It may be determined that this is just not financially viable. But I would hate to see this product and this project, what you proposed, leave Broomfield, because I think there's a lot of aspects of this that I really do like. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff and everyone for your presentations. I wrote my notes on my phone, so excuse me. I appreciate the affordable housing aspect of it. The fact I think we was at 19 units and it's going to be 60% AMI, and I believe it's deed restricted for 20 years. That's great. I believe we need that in Broomfield, and so I think that's very important. So when you talk about workforce housing, that's very important to Broomfield. I will say, we haven't had a whole lot of modular building. I don't even know if we've had any in Broomfield. Have we had any? And how much?
Councilmember Hinkle, thank you for that question. Anna can address it. So again, so in years past, like circa 2000, modular housing meant mobile home. Modular housing means prefabrication now. So when we talk about the BCC, it's a very different way to develop. It's repeatable, it's quicker. It takes less craftsmanship, if you will, because again, it's prefabricated. Anna, what am I missing?
You know, I'm not sure you're missing anything in particular. I think this might be our first residential project that would be modular. In this way, I can't think of another project, but we can definitely look into it and get back to council.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful on what our experiences is with that. And the developer, if you could tell me, you know, what sort of, what you're looking for as far as when you're searching for someone to do this modular building, what are you looking for? What aspects are you looking for? Because I wonder when you put it together, is the plumbing going to be the same as it would be for something that you can make on site? I just worry about the connectivity, honestly, between, you know, one place to another, because you could have a utility wall, right? And you have to have that in place. So what does that look like?
Yeah, sure. Today there are 25 modular factories in the US building apartments. Some of the apartment buildings in our presentation, we can share it on slide 2. So it's a good quality. In terms of the scope, approximately 60% of the construction scope is done at the factory. So it's basically everything within the unit, drywall, appliances, floors, the windows. What is left for the GC to do, you know, traditionally the GC takes 100% of the job. The GC only does the foundations, the facade, the roof, the central MEP connections, and site work, and the connecting of the modules. So these modules are built, it takes 2 months to build all the units in the factory. Then when they're trucked in 14 to 21 days, they're all like Lego bricks. And then the GC will work with the facade. So in other words, it's a collaboration between the GC and the factory. There's a cluster of factories in Boise, Idaho. There are about 4 factories. So these are the factories that we're looking for. And yeah, I'm sorry.
So how are you differentiating, I guess, like what makes it a quality place versus, because there's going to be, you know, quality home builders too, right? And some home builders, you know, we've learned, we get a lot of emails about a certain area where, you know, maybe they didn't do the roofs right? So we want to avoid these emails, and we want to make sure that the construction is done well, so that our residents want to stay, work, and play, right? So can you just tell me, I don't know if you can tell me or not, if you're that far along in the process, what are your requirements, or what do you guys look for?
Sure. There are many. Let me start with builders, traditional construction. It's way less predictable because everything is done on site. Every part of the supply chain is brought to the site. And while in a factory, there is repeatability between units. So it's protected from the elements as well. And we have different seasons. And that leads every trade to be done with more quality, more predictability, and then it's trucked to the site. So that's one of the things that we look for in factories. These factories have been delivering apartments for 10 years. So all these factories, we vet them, we speak with previous developers. Modular construction is a little bit more common in the mountains where you have hotels in the mountains because of the seasonality and workforce housing. So we're vetting these companies, talking with developers who've worked at those factories before. Us ourselves, our team has worked on 5 modular projects in California, plus several across Canada. And And so I'm sorry, I'm trying to be more concise.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It sounds like you guys have a good vetting system. That's what I just kind of want to know, just making sure it's good quality and not just sort of, the cheapest out there. So I would appreciate that as you look into that. I would like to see, Earl Franz kind of weighed in, as far as, talking about playground space or tables to eat outside. So I would like to see something like that, where we know this is not only a place where people live inside, but they can live outside as well. And I do think that if we add this space to an area where we have retail, that it will help the retail. I found, if we bring people into that retail space, we can help. The public land dedication, though, just with the information that we have right now, is a real stickler for me. It just seems really incomplete without information, about the trails, and I appreciate that letter, read that today as well. And so I would love to explore all of those things that we're talking about. That public land dedication is pretty important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've been kind of lukewarm on this project as well. As you've heard, there's some positives that we've seen. The modular construction is definitely unique, I guess, for residential. So that's kind of neat. The portable units, something that we always talk about here on City Council. So that's positive as well. And actually, I don't think the location from at least a residential consumer standpoint is really bad. I can see, folks that would want to be close to the shops and the restaurants that are close by there. So I can see an appeal to a certain segment of the population, maybe not necessarily families with kids, because you've heard the no parks or that type of outdoor recreation is close by. So I think those are the good, but for me, there are a few concerns. One of them, which you can't really do much about, and that's the concern to our, long-term financial health of our community. It's a discussion we've had numerous times over the past year or so. Every time we change from a commercial to residential, it hits our bottom line. And we've had some budget conversations, preliminary ones, that do indicate that we're going to be facing some tough decisions in the coming years. So whenever we make a decision to reduce potential long-term income, that's going to create ripples down the road, and we do it for one, they sort of add up, and then we have some significant decisions we'll have to make in the future. So that's a big concern that I think we're all going to have to grapple with here on the council. On top of that, one thing that hasn't brought up is just the location close to the airport, the Jefferson County Airport. I think that's the name of it now, Rocky Mountain. I forget what the Rocky Mountain should know this. I'm on the noise committee, but given that you're just south of the airport, there are a lot of concerns by neighbors in Superior in particular, but also some in Broomfield with the increased airport noise. So building more residential, almost immediately adjacent to the airport, that's going to be an issue that you're going to have to address and certainly make very clear to any potential residents, if this does get built. And then just briefly, I would not be in favor at the moment of any waiver of our cash in lieu that would be required for in lieu of a public land dedication. That's a pretty big deal for us here. So I'd have to hear a lot more to even consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Comments.
Thanks for bringing this forward. I agree with a lot of the comments made here. I love the idea of the prefab. I think it's awesome. And I appreciate how difficult this area has been to work with, and I appreciate staff working with you all for as long as they have to kind of help you along this process. Questions that I have are for staff and maybe for the meeting down the road. The first one is around, and the reason why I'm saying this is because this area is inundated with a lot of multifamily, or will be soon. And at what point does a certain area become too multifamily and not enough other types of housing? And then my second question would be for us to discuss, in 2015, Broomfield City Council put into place the amendment to building code relating to construction defects and right to cure. And clearly no developers have taken us up on this. And I wonder, has it got lost in the dust? And so I kind of want to resurrect that a little bit and see if there are opportunities in the community for more for sale homes. And then I think it's such a cool thing, and I question the fit for this particular area. I think Councilmember Broom brought that up, and Councilmember Schaaf also. And I don't want to discourage you from building something like this here. I think it's wonderful, and I think it's very creative. And the fact that it takes away from some of the I guess the trash and the environmental toxicity, I suppose, would be an appropriate word. And I think we did bring it up in the Housing Advisory Committee, and the Housing Advisory Committee supported this because of the affordable housing, and I that's the other part of it, right? You've got 20 units here for 20 years. And I also do know how the bottom line works, and we've had a lot of developers come and ask for an amendment with our commercial, and I guess it's a slippery slope, but if it's the right fit, then maybe there's another area that can handle commercial where there might not be. I don't know. So those are my concerns. It has nothing to do with the product that you're bringing forward. Okay, it's the area and some of the other issues that I had, the questions that I would like for us to discuss in addition to what Councilmember Schaaf brought up. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Tessier, if I may, so quite a bit to, and again, managing expectations from a Broomfield perspective. And that is that there is no economist or site that we can see where this housing bubble is going to burst for the state of Colorado. That's number one. We look at we were at an economist meeting where the best and the brightest had foretold from a heat map, because of the climate that's being experienced on the East Coast, the water, the torrential rains, the continued flooding, they foresee that for the next 5 to 8 years. The fires, trials, and tribulations on the West Coast, they don't see that stopping anytime soon. In fact, they determine that there's going to be more fires, higher heat, additional drought. So companies and individuals are moving to Idaho, to Colorado, and to Nevada. Those 3 big hot spots. And so it's going to continue. And so from a council priority perspective and a community priority perspective, when you have, again, 34 square miles, 20% more to build out, when we have these really difficult to develop spots, that's the totality of the conversation, right? And so nothing can be ruled out when you check that initial box about affordable housing. And the reason that that spot is available, not only because of the challenges, and because of the easements, anytime that you have a more difficult to develop spot, the land's going to be cheaper.
Yeah.
Which allows the developer then to do the affordable housing. Broomfield's expensive. It's expensive to be here, it's expensive to develop here. And so when you have the competing priorities about the where and the when, again, it takes the totality of circumstances about what we're willing to waive or forego in order to check that box. Our days are becoming shorter and the opportunity shorter to be able to say, if not here, where? particularly on the residential housing. And your point, Councilmember Tessier, Jeff Romine and I were on the phone with 2 developers yesterday. And one of the pieces was we have to have for sale units. So your menu of lists of items, you know, the public land dedication and the affordable housing and the sustainability and the trail connection, and the days of being able to have all of that in our developments are going to be few and fewer as we move forward. Because again, the costs of, we all continue to see the inflation component that is, it's very real now. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but Councilmember Hinkle, your question about the fabrication, that's the wave of the future. From a delivery perspective, from a supply perspective, from a made in the US reliability perspective, and again, the repeatable process of what those fabrications look like are in fact much more reliable than kind of the hand cut, right? The grooves are standard, in other words. So we're going to see more and more of that capability. So all that is just to say, development is going to become more complex than it is now. And so, again, the trade-offs of checking all of those boxes, those developments are going to be few and far between in order to make all of that happen.
Thank you for that. And, you know, just to add to that, I mean, we see how California, New York, all these places that are, rents are sky high, ours are becoming the same way, and I want to avoid that, right? Like if we're walking down and we're falling off the same cliff, and so I don't want that to happen. And then you also look at some economists who are saying, you know, if we solve the housing crisis and the costs, then you know, we have to address the housing crisis in order to get out of these high costs, and so yeah, I there's a lot to debate, and I think it's a philosophical, you know, point and the values point of how we want to make the rest of Broomfield. Do we wait for the construction defects to have for sale? These are some of the things, and I know this is, you know, but I have like 4 more weeks on council, so I need to get this out. And so but those are some of the things that I really think about. And I think, you know, your product definitely touches on a lot of our priorities. That's why I like it. And I don't want to just take that answer. I'm gonna continue to push to see how much we can get for our residents. And I'll probably have to hear it from meeting, you know, with Jeff on next Friday, and we'll have those conversations with him as well.
And that construction defect, that is no joke.
Yeah.
And it's like any, and I believe that Councilmember Lindstadt may very well have been a legislative aid to a lot of folks there that were debating that issue. And so from a sausage making perspective, it's like anything else. The unintended consequences, you don't see them immediately. You don't see them within a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Generally, on those sweeping policy changes and implications from a statutory perspective, you don't see them from 5 to 7 years. And guess what? It's been 7 years. And so now it's not a trickle, right? Now it is a upside the head. Couple that with exponentially higher development costs, higher land cost. I mean, again, it's a perfect storm for a cataclysmic meeting from things that we can't control to things that we can control, which is the theory and the practice of really taking a long-term approach when we do convert commercial to residential, that's a big deal, and the culmination of what that looks like. So we just have so many more great opportunities to have these really robust conversations and do what's best for the community now and 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Awesome. I want to revisit that 2015 right to cure that for future space energy, because most of the people on this council didn't even know about it, including me. So that's another time. Councilmember Lim.
Looking, I guess that 5 to 10 year or beyond vision too is where I want to go with the modular construction. So it's my understanding with modular construction, well, first of all, in sustainability, you said that the modular construction will reduce the construction waste, and I understand that's great. I understand that aspect of sustainability there. The other understanding that I have is that modular construction itself can build more efficient buildings than on-site construction where City Manager Hoffman was talking about the gaps in between, you control those. So I guess what I would want to know in this project coming forward is, I haven't heard to a large extent, do you intend for these buildings to have a strong energy efficiency rating because of that modular construction? I would think you could do it different ways. You could have a modular construction that isn't energy efficient, or I know you can have that goal in modular construction.
Yeah, and I think the point is modular, conventional. You can design energy efficiency in either of those formats. One doesn't necessarily provide it more than the other. It's a decision from a design perspective of what you're trying to do and achieve. So the IECC is what rules energy efficiency in building design. And so no matter what we're doing, conventional or modular, we're going to have to comply with that. Modular construction does create some inherent kind of efficiencies in sustainability because you are building self-contained boxes, right? So every demising wall between units is a double wall versus being a single wall. So those things create better sound transmission or eliminate sound transmission between units, creates higher level of insulation between those units. Eduardo talked about the skin. There's different ways of achieving that energy efficiency through the skin, through the roof structure, et cetera. So those are all very kind of finite details that we deal with throughout the design process to then achieve those requirements from the IECC in terms of that energy efficiency of the building. When you're looking at those types of things, you also start to look at HVAC systems and those types of things. And those create a big kind of component of it. Modular construction likes instant hot water heaters versus tanks. I mean, there's just different things that the modular construction side kind of starts to take you down that does create those additional sustainability things. It also doesn't necessarily preclude us from any of the traditional sustainability items, like doing solar on the roof or any of those types of things. We can still include those types of concepts within these structures as well.
Okay, thank you. So I was trying to, with my energy efficiency question, I was trying to, in my mind, imagine what could, what other boxes, I guess, this can check off, for what we're looking for in buildings, to justify the public land dedication fee waiver. And I mean, because that is huge. I mean, we have other proposed development proposals come before us now that are meeting the affordable housing ordinance that aren't asking for that large of a fee waiver. So that is very significant in my mind and a hurdle to overcome with this project coming forward with that kind of ask for a fee waiver. I guess you've referred to the that it will be workforce housing. Are you going to be able to provide, if this project came forward, some price points that would convince us that this is going to be fitting a need, as you say, for the missing middle. So that would be another element that I would certainly want to see if this project were to come forward. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Benstead?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my first question, looking at this, why not studios? Why just 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in this proposal? I feel like if you were gonna do, this building style studios would make a ton of sense, in this area where there might not be the amenities for people with lots of, with families and kids. And, did you guys think about studios or?
Yeah, I think, in general, in modular construction, studio, 1 bedroom it kind of goes hand in hand at some level. So we're still kind of working out the unit mix ultimately and what that looks like. We haven't gotten into specific unit design. What we're also seeing from a market standpoint is, studio is used oftentimes to create a very kind of efficient unit. But it's not the best livable unit, and especially what we all experienced through COVID and having to work at home and live at home and do those types of things. So we're seeing more kind of robust demand around, even in a studio, having a separate sleeping space, where it's partially walled off, which then gets it very close to what we would consider a 1 bedroom. And so those are the types of things that we would then kind of continue to work on and develop as we get into the specific unit plans in terms of how they're configured, how they're laid out, but it's not off the table by any means.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just looking at this, that area, you've got a lot of walkability to a lot of retail. You got restaurants. You got a lot of new development happening. We have a lot of multifamily apartments in this area. I like the building. I like the affordability. I love the 60% AMI. But when I was looking at it, I was thinking workforce, and I was thinking particularly young people without children who might have entry-level jobs or work in retail or whatever the case. And small efficiency studios, I think, could actually make a lot of sense in this area, especially where people don't have families. So that was what my gut said when I first read this, and I would support if you bring this back. I would support smaller units for people that are really that are working in the area preferably. You're asking for a lot with the dedication and the hit to the long range financial plan, but I see a lot of value in the type of project that you're proposing. So I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I think when you're looking at housing, you want to make sure you're getting housing that fits the area. And people have different needs and different desires. So I would just I would like to see you guys look for very small units for that market instead of maybe the family market. So those are my only real thoughts. I think it's a really cool project, and thank you guys for trying to make housing more affordable, because this is the challenge of our time. So and more sustainable. So that's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lahenden?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll bet that when you came here tonight for your concept review, most likely you didn't expect to have the discussion go in kind of the directions that it has gone. But it's a very interesting discussion, and I appreciate you, whether you meant to or not, I appreciate you sparking it. So a couple of thoughts. First of all, I won't be on council when you come back with this, but I would think that one of the things you'd want to do would be, rather than cite a study from Sweden saying that modular construction is more environmentally efficient, something like that, you want to come back with some numbers, some studies around here, because it seems to me that if you're talking about, my mind's just kind of blown with the idea of building these modular bits in Boise and bringing them all the way here. And I have some trouble believing that a study in Sweden where maybe a modular piece would be trucked 100, 200, 300 miles versus what, 700 from Boise, that truly is going to bring about a smaller environmental footprint. I certainly understand the reasons for considering it, but I want to see a little more proof of that it truly is more than just I'd want to see numbers to back up what you're talking about. So I would note that offsite construction, what's old is new again. Offsite construction and not exactly modular, but prepackaged buildings. Sears and Roebuck, 110, 120 years ago would sell you a barn, right? That would come in pieces and you'd have a barn raising and assemble it. Much more recently than that, companies such as architectural steel and whatnot, all the steel buildings that everyone kind of looks at and says, maybe not all of them, but many of them in town, the ones on North Midway, the ones on Industrial Lane, things like that, were prefab steel buildings that have similar characteristics in terms of being quick to put up, having a very low environmental footprint from that standpoint, very much repeatable. They're just, how do I say this politely? Aesthetically not as pleasing as some other types of construction, but what's old is new again. So I very much appreciate, my family actually owns some of these architectural steel buildings that are now 70 years old and going strong. So if that's not environmental sustainability, I don't know what is. Okay, so the specifics, there's a lot to like in your project. There's a lot that I have issues with. I don't know where I would suggest that you go with all of it, but the public land dedication and the park access, man, that is going to be tough. I do not, having sat on both the Open Space and Trails Advisory Committee as well as Parks, Rec, and Senior Services Committee for a long time, it's really hard for me to think of a group of people living here, whether they be workforce housing or what, without access to the same kinds of amenities that we're trying to create in the rest of Broomfield. Not all of Broomfield has it, but certainly all the new developments in Broomfield. It's definitely a tough site. I understand that, and I understand the reasons for trying to do what you're doing. So that makes me think I'm more open to it. But then I come back to, as several council members have said, the conversion from commercial to residential, boy, that was tough. That would probably tip the scales for me tonight as a no vote. I don't know how you get around that. I do not know. One possibility, though, that I would put to our legal staff, as Mayor has suggested, talking about revisiting the construction defect discussions and whatnot, and maybe it is time to rattle some cages at the state and whatnot. Here's my thought that I would toss out for that study session that I won't be at. Is there a precedent, Attorney Rogers, if the construction type is modular, where a certain amount of the construction is done off-site? Is there precedent for reducing the on-site within Colorado liability of a condominium, a for sale condominium or townhome community interest property? And is that a different way to approach the construction defect problem? And maybe that would allow us to, I don't know, but it's, if a certain amount of the fabrication is going to be done in Boise, how does that liability translate? Or does it? Is there a way to work on that? So I don't know, but that might be a way to, again, if I were going to be on council voting for this, that might be something. If it could be a for sale product instead of for rent, that would be cool. So that's a bullet point that I would respectfully request beyond the study session that the mayor has suggested. So fascinating ideas you're bringing forward, and I really appreciate them. I really wish I could just say, yeah, go for it. But there are definitely some tough questions on this site. Whatever you choose to do, thank you very much for thinking of Broomfield, and thank you for bringing these interesting conversations to our town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council members for their first round? Well, then we will go to second round. Councilmember Zhang.
Thank you, Mary. I just have one quick question. told you I didn't want to see this go away quite yet. So you talked about workforce housing, and 96 units of workforce housing. 19 of those would be priced at the 60% AMI. So I'm curious about what the remaining 80 units would be priced at. What AMI would those be targeted at?
Sure. The target rents for the remaining units, they range between 1,400 per month, 2,300 per month, which there is a typical calculation by economists that you multiply that by 12, divide by 33%, because people are expected to place approximately 33% of their income towards housing. And you will end up with folks who make between 80% to 120% of median income to do the calculation. Also, bear in mind that from 1,400 to 2,300, those are the extremes, so there are units in between. And so if you do this, the short answer is we're aiming at 80% to 120%.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you for that answer. I think that, one thing that comes up for me is the cost to the long-range financial plan versus the amount of affordable units. So that helps me kind of wrap my head around that. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. That's all I have.
Thank you. And from what I remember with our matrix, we're also looking at more than a long-range financial plan. We're looking at the tax revenue generated by these residents. So it's not just this isolated metric that we're going to use. And my question is, because I really did take to heart the letter from our Open Space and Trails Committee and the Parks and Rec not being able to support the waiver of the public land dedication. Have you ever thought about a rooftop park? I mean, they've done a great deal with AstroTurf these days if you're worried about water. And has anybody ever used a rooftop park to count toward a public land dedication? I'm getting a no in the back from our Director of Open Space and Trails.
Mayor, I'd be happy to answer that. We haven't had anyone use a rooftop patio for public land dedication because it wouldn't be publicly accessible. But we have had developers use rooftop decks for open areas or private amenity space for their residents, and that would be appropriate.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, this just came to me. Gotta think out of the box. We have to be creative and resourceful, and you're trying to meet our needs, and it is a difficult spot, but we do want to make sure that it's got the amenities that most residents do want to expect. Not that everybody's going to have those needs, because there are urban living conditions where, and I've lived in them, where you just don't have those things, and it's a choice. So people can choose that. But I do appreciate you putting together this proposal, and I hope you got some good feedback.
Mayor, could I just mention one thing?
Absolutely.
In response to your note, since
Yeah.
I work in Denver, and Denver has a green roof ordinance.
Oh.
And so we recently built a new residence hall and didn't want a green roof on it. So we took out about 12 parking spaces to provide more green spaces. That was our trade. So it can be done in that way as well.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that, Councilmember Cohen. Well, that's all we have for you. I hope that was some good input. And thank you for being with us this evening. Well, that concludes the agenda items for this evening's study session. There being no further